As we're coming into the spring now, the carp are starting to wake up, and one of the best baits for catching them fish is pellets. Pellets are a real selective bait. You don't want to be fishing with baits such as maggots and casters now, because you're going to sometimes get bitted out by smaller fish. The carp don't want loads of bait, but by being selective and fishing with the right baits, i.e. 6mm pellets, you can have some bumper days when you're fishing for carp. So let me show you exactly how I go about catching them. The first thing I want to talk about is bait. It's really important that, like I say, you pick the right bait. Pellets are the go-to carp bait for me. The reason for this is you don't have to feed a lot of them to get a response. Pinging 2 or 3 pellets is sometimes all it takes to get a bite, but the beauty of these is they create a lot of noise. Now for me, 6mm is my go-to. If you fish 4s or 8s, 4s sometimes are a little bit too small, you can get pestered by silvers, etc. 8s are a little bit too selective, and it's a bit still too early on in the year for that. So 6 is a great all-round size. Cell is the option I've gone for today. The reason for this, they're a little bit lower oil. They're not as high oil as, say, the Activate ones, which are a bit more of a meaty summer bait. These are just a little bit sweeter. They've got that sweet smell to them, but like I say, they're not too high in oil. So you're getting all the attraction and the noise from them, but you've also got a nice sweet smell to it as well. Now, when it comes to where to fish, this is a really important factor. What I've done there is I've had a little plumb about using a heavier plummet, so I have a 20 gram plummet here. Most of the time I like to use a 10 gram because I feel like a 10 gram gives you a true reading of how deep the lake is and how natural your float's going to sit. With a 20 gram, sometimes it's great for finding silt though. I've gone out there and we're still fishing on silt, but what I'm finding is my plummet is not sticking in. So it's always good to have a drop about and just make sure you're not fishing on a really soft bottom of the lake bed, because if you are, what you're going to tend to find is more silt gets kicked up, the fish find it harder to find your bait, and then catching the fish becomes harder. So by donking my plummet about, having a little feel, I think, yep, that's great. So I'm happy with that. Rig wise, I like to keep things simple. So I'll start at the elastic itself. It's actually a prototype elastic. I would say this is like a medium hollow, around about 2.1mm thickness. Line durability is really important. I've gone for 019 mainline because, again, you're catching an odd big fish up to 10 pounds. You want to make sure that your rig's durable. I always like to fish with back shots because today, even though the wind's off us back, it can lead to your rig pushing about, and you don't really want that. You can end up foul looking fish. So stability is really important, but you don't want to fish overly heavy in your rig as well. So I've got 2 number 9 back shots just to help that. I talked about stability, but I still want quite a positive rig, and I'm still fishing a light float. So here, in 6 foot of water, which is roughly what we've got, I've gone for 0.4 of a gram of rig. And you might think, well, that's quite light. How do you make your rig stable? And that's where the shotting comes into it. So we're fishing with 6mm pellets today. I've gone for a 1.8mm bristle, so not 0.4 gram bobby. So it's perfect for fishing with big baits. You've got, you're not got too fine of a bristle where your float's going to be dragging under, etc. But we've still got a nice thick tip so we can see the bites and not get too many daft liners and be striking at foul lookers. But this is where the stability comes from it. I've got 6 number 9 cubes there as a bulk, and then I've got 1 dropper. Now, because I've got 6 foot of water, I don't want a spread bulk, because with that sort of weight float, my rig won't be as positive and it won't be as stable. I'm still going to get a nice slow fall from this. This little bottom part of the rig is where all the sort of magic happens. So I've got a bulk at around about 13 inches from the actual hook itself, and this last little bit is where I'm going to be lifting and dropping the rig, and that's the bit that's going to be fluttering in. I could, if I really wanted to, if the water were clear, which it's not today, but if it was, I could move that up and fish with a bulk and 2. But nice positive rig, nice positive shotting pattern, a simple bulk there, and then I've got 1 number 9 dropper, which is about 6 inches from my hook, and then I've got a 4-inch hook length. Again, you could have a 5 or a 6-inch hook length if you wanted, but just make sure that last dropper is around about 6 inches from the hook. I always find that's a good distance to have. You don't want it too close. If you was fishing for smaller fish, you might move that shot down, but with bigger fish, you don't want them brushing against your dropper shot and giving you line bites, and you end up striking and foul looking the fish. And then hook length wise, I've got 0.15 mainline to a 16s SLWG, and then I've just got a little microband on the end where I can just attach a 6mm pellet to it. So not gone for a really heavy hook pattern. SMWGs are my go-to carp pattern, But when I'm fishing at this time of the year, you know, we're only just coming into spring, the water's only just warming up, just having a slightly lighter hook means that you can catch a few more fish and hopefully get a few more bites. So yeah, quite delicate, but 0.15, because again, you've got to balance your gear for the size of the fish you're fishing for, and we're fishing for sort of like 3 to 6 pound carp here on average, and that should hopefully be perfect. Like any style of fishing, the most important thing is getting your feeding right. Now, we're only using one bait today, so that simplifies things straight away. We're not using baits in conjunction with each other like, you know, maggots casters or hemp and corn, etc. We've just got a bag of 6mm, nice, simple, and straight to the point. Now, what I like to do is a draw fishing via the catapult with noise. The downside to that is your bait can be spread a little bit. So to start the session off, I would always like to just pot a few pellets, get some fish around my hook bait, and then slowly build the peg up. So I'm not going to put lots of bait in. I'm going to be feeding very minimal amounts of bait. I've got 5 pellets there into the pot. And then what I like to do is just give that little pot a dunk. I always do this when I'm fishing with hard pellets because they're dry. Sometimes they can bounce out of your pot. By dunking them, the water drains out the pot and it just stops them bouncing about your pot as easy. So as I ship out there, I'd like to get out there, get to my marker. Chose to fish 14 metres today because again, the wind's off my back, so it's not too hard, but fish within your boundaries. Don't be trying to fish too far or too short. When I get there now, I'm just going to tap a few pellets in, 5 pellets, lift that rig up, just wait for my bulk to catch up, which it has done now, then I can just fold my rig in and that last little bit will just fall in nice. Now I'm going to sit and wait for a bite, and then once I've got my bite, I might ping a few pellets. When it comes to loose feeding pellets, the noise that you get from that is really attractive to the fish. It rings that little dinner bell. But if there's not enough fish competing in your peg, that's when that pot can come in. So today, I'm going to fish both pot and catapult, use them both, one to attract the fish, and one of my favourite sayings is loose feed to attract and pot to catch, because that means I can catch fish right on top of where I'm fishing by potting nice and accurately, and then I can loose feed to draw new fish into the peg. When the fishing gets really good, I'll probably be able to take that pot off and then just ping some pellets. And then what I've got to worry about is the volume of pellets that I'm feeding. So now I'm getting a few indications from potting my bait in. There we go. What I can start to do is start to ping a few pellets just to gather some more fish in the area. The downside to pinging pellets is obviously you're not going to be 100% accurate all the time. Nobody can fire pellets within 4 inches of the float, and that's why the pot is so good to keep regrouping your bait. But the pot won't keep drawing fish in all the time. So this is actually a smaller fish. It's actually an F1, which does show that even on them bigger pellets you can still catch some nice fish. Probably what I'm starting to get me indications from. Them carp love that dinner bell being rung, and hopefully that's where loose feeding will start to come into it. So my pellet's absolutely fine. I don't need to change it. I only change my pellet if it starts to go soft and it starts to break down. What I can do now is I can go back in, repeat the process, feeding like 5 or 6 with a pot, and then I'm going to be looking to ping, in terms of volume of bait, I'm going to be looking to ping 2 to 4 pellets out there. And what that's going to do is just create a bit of noise, drag some fish into a wider area, get them grazing around my peg. We don't want to be actually fishing on a 10p piece here. We want to draw fish into the area. When we've got bigger fish in our peg, them bigger fish are basically taking up a lot of space in your peg, and that's where foul looking can become a problem. If you just fish with a pot all the time and you're fishing for big fish, you could lead to more foul look fish digging up the bottom, etc. And that's why pinging is always a great option. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep with a pot, keep putting a bit of bait in with that pot to keep the accuracy, but I'm also going to be pinging a few pellets as well as. So get to where I'm going again, tap them 5 or 6 pellets in. Actually forgot to dunk my pellets then as I shipped out. Always remember to dunk them pellets. They didn't actually fall out, so it's not a problem, but that's one thing you can get, is your pellets can fall out because you've not dunked them. So it's just good practice. Got a little bit carried away there and just forgot to do it. So if I've not had a bite there after say 2 or 3 minutes and I feel like that little bit of bait has not drawn a fish in, or it's not pinpointed a fish to my little spot, I'll pick the catapult up, start pinging 2 or 3 pellets, 4 pellets maybe. What I don't want to be doing is pinging 6 or 10 pellets, because if I don't get bites for a 15-20 minute period, what can happen then is you build up a lot of 6mm pellets on the bottom, and all of a sudden your chance of your hook bait getting picked up becomes less and less. 2 or 3 pellets is enough. Just that little plop, plop, plop on the surface is enough to get the fish coming and having a look. And when they come in, you've got that nice big particle, and that's why 6mm are quite a selective bait. So feeding wise, like I said, I'm just going to ping 2 or 3 pellets, a few more little pellets, and you can see there they're going around me float in sort of a 2-foot square area. That's great. Fish are going to be grazing. When a big carp is sort of 2 foot long itself anyway, it only has to turn round. It can be feeding on 1 pellet and turn round again, feeding on another pellet. If you're feeding too accurately with a pot, one, you're not making any noise to draw fish in, but also you can lead to start foul looking fish as well. As the beauty of loose feeding as well is it always gives you the option of maybe some fish coming up and potentially catching shallow, which works better in the summer months. Once the water's really warm through, that's why pinging's great, because it gives the option of the fish coming off the bottom or staying down on the bottom, and then you can follow them to suit. This time of the year, we're generally just going to catch hard on the bottom. You know, very unlikely, even though the sun's out today, you know, it's not fully warm through yet, and springtime carp fishing, most of the time you're catching them down on the deck. So I'll give that roughly about 2 to 3 minutes. If I've not had a bite again, I'll ping a few more pellets. If I'm getting a few signs and indications, and I know there's a fish present in my peg, then I might ship back in, put a few pellets in the pot, and just regroup the fish again. My final tip is really important. You've gone through all the hard work of getting your rig right, chose where to fish in the morning. One thing that people forget is carp are very aggressive feeders, and what can happen as your session progresses, the fish start disturbing that crust of silt on the bottom and your peg starts getting deeper. A telltale sign of this is either foul looking fish or your float starts to sink a little bit lower, and all of a sudden you're thinking, why is my float sinking? And that can lead to the fish disturbing the bottom, and you're actually fishing off the bottom. So you can see here, I've put a plummet back on. The right hand side of my peg where I've not been fishing, my float's plumbed up perfect. But where I have been fishing now, I'm coming into this little left hand bit, you'll see it starts to get a tidgy bit deeper. There, you can see my float's dropped down. So if my rig was fishing there, I'd be only just touching the bottom, or I might even be off the bottom, because obviously my line's under tension. If you come back to the left hand side, again, it's just moving away a little bit. So what they've done now is they've created a little hole, or just moved maybe half an inch of silt. And what that leads to is your float, you've not got as much line on the bottom as what you would like. So I have 2 options here. I can either add the line back onto my rig, or I can actually just move to the right hand side of my peg. Now, if it was towing, say, right to left on a certain lake and it's going to run towards that little dip, I'd add line back on. But what I can easily do is I can just manipulate the fish and just maneuver the fish over to a foot to the right of where I started, and then I've got a nice flat bottom and it plumbs up exactly the same as what I was fishing. But be very aware that they might actually do that again in half an hour, an hour's time. The warmer it gets, the more active the fish get. This is the problem you have when you're fishing on silt. They're not actually blowing today, but a telltale sign is when they start fizzing. It means that when they're fizzing, the silt's getting disrupted, the gas is coming up, they're probably moving any little debris that's on the bottom. So you have 2 options. You can either go beyond it, you know, put a dolly butt on and fish just off the back of it, and hopefully the bottom will be nice and fresh and cleaner again and flatter. But you tend to get all these little divots. You don't want to be fishing in it. If you're fishing in a little divot, what can happen is the fish have got to dip in to get it, and they don't want to. You want to be on the nice flat clean bottom, somewhere where it's nice and easy for the fish to pick your bait up, and then it makes it easier to catch them. So be very aware of that. Even if they only just dig it out half an inch, sometimes it's just enough to bring that pellet off the bottom, and then you lose all your stability of your rig, your bait starts moving about, you start foul looking fish, and it's an absolute nightmare. Like I said, the two solutions to it is I could bring my pole back in, put another inch on my depth. I don't personally like doing that. If I can find a nice little spot just a foot to the right or a foot to the left or a foot beyond it, I'll just replumb, fish that new little spot, and I'll just start feeding in that little area. And all the fish have got to do to move a foot is literally just turn round and they're back on your bait again. So yeah, my final tip is just be aware that the fish can dig the silt out, and that's when you can start having problems with foul hookers or just not even getting bites.